Hey guys, this is Color from Chronology Gaming.
This is episode 36 of Counterpoints. We've reached the midlife crisis. Yeah. We've been together a while, Moses. There's a lot of sparks in the early days, it was a lot of fun, but eventually, you tell yourself you're not bored anymore, but you're running through the same old shit day after day.
You're getting those messages that's like, I really got to put it off today. I have to, I've got something else going on.
It's like, I'll tell you a classic example, right, is there's a Twitter that everyone who's been in green rooms know I'm a big fan of, which is the one called So Very British. And it's where it's basically does a really good job of articulating sort of weird things that people in British culture think, but you don't ever really say it. Like no one's ever really articulated it openly, right? So a classic example of that, which is exactly what happens when, you've been friends with someone for a little bit too long, or, they just come around a little bit too much, and you need to have a bit of a time before you see them again. Is this one where it says something like the euphoric relief of hearing the words like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to cancel tonight, because when you've agreed to do something and the closer it gets, you're like, is this really what I want to do in my life? I've kind of said I'm gonna do this, but yeah.
Listen, if I ever want to experience that Twitter profile, I just hang out with DDK for 24 hours.
He's very much like that.
He's like the stereotypical Britishman, isn't he?
I mean, I'll give credit to Anders. Anders also could absolutely be British. He's the guy who just only cancels last minute on everything, and says, "Oh yeah, I definitely want to do that." And then it's almost like at that point you want to have a fucking police officer that comes out and does a full sobriety test. I'm sorry, he's drunk. You're like, oh shit, right? Take that out of the calendar. Take it out.
Anders is the guy who you'll be with a group of 4 people and you'll be like, let's do dinner at this time. And he's like, well, I'd love to do dinner, but only if it's at this time. And then it comes around to the time that he changed it to.
I know where this is going.
And then he's just like, you know what? I've got a bit of a migraine.
And he was the only one that you all renegotiated for as well. Yeah. Classic. Yeah. So there's a lot has actually happened since the last episode. And I think I've got 3 solid topics that I think we need to discuss. One has to be not even EPL as a tournament, because as we've already pointed out, and as many people realised, it was quite a weak field, considering what a huge tournament it was. I mean, as much as I ripped on the Season 4 that Cloud9 won, I actually think that one even had better teams overall than this one. This one had some good ones, but this is a great example, right, of where people get so mad when you're like, I told you so. But remember, right, the reason why, Moses, I got upset that Envious and Mouse Sports qualified rather than Astralis and FaZe is not because I hate Mouse Sports, for example. Actually, I think Mouse Sports is pretty decent. I don't think Envious is good, admittedly. The reason why has nothing to do with liking or hating those teams, or liking or hating a FaZe and Astralis. It's purely because it makes for a worse tournament. And then this is unfortunately, an extreme example of that, where not only did you have a bad tournament, but you had probably the worst case scenario could happen, where the side of the bracket that North was on was pure ass. Because what happened was, not only was their group very weak, but then Na'Vi didn't even get out of it, so you already robbed one potential top team there. And then unfortunately on the other side of the bracket, because of the 3 teams that got out of the group of death, G2 and SK were first and third. They both went on the same side of the bracket. So you basically got the weakest possible group into the weakest possible bracket into North just had to beat Team Liquid to make the final and ended the tournament in second place, yet only had, a win off Na'Vi and 1 win off G2 kind of to show for it, for coming second. So that's not North's fault, but it means that really that tournament itself wasn't that interesting. The real thing you want to talk about is only G2 versus SK. Now that's a good topic. So what do you think about that, Moses? Because I have to say, when I saw that veto come out, I thought, this is fucking great for SK. This is exactly what you want, right? Someone picking Cash. Let me think. No, SK picked Cash, but then Overpass was picked into SK. Now, that sounds pretty sick as you're opening 2 maps. And then the decider would have been Cobblestone, I think.
Yeah, no, that was a cool series as well, just because SK seems to be they seem to be on this rise right now, right? So I felt like they were kind of. I'm trying to bring up the match page so I can actually get some memory. 16-12 Cash Overpass. No, this was just kind of. This matchup was scary to me just because Cold Zera had a really weak tournament, you know? Like, Cold Zera, actually, this is probably one of the worst tournaments he's ever had. And he wasn't necessarily, like, bad. He just wasn't kind of carrying. So it was kind of, if SK could even match up with G2, it seemed like it was kind of flipped, you know, where we've talked so long about SK having that powerful trio. But yeah, no, this was a big test for their cash, I think, because G2 and all the Frenchmen, I mean, this cash is a map that just seems to suit them. So I think that was actually a big test for SK to have picked cash into them, was huge. And then you had the reverse, right? Where G2, I feel like that was a big test for them to play overpass against SK. Like those, if you swap those two map picks, I think that would have made more sense, right? SK picking overpass and G2 picking cash. That, in my head, seemed like that would have been the logical thing.
Well, what's funny is at the time when I was doing that like Twitch stream on Room on Fire, they actually on the graphics, maybe it was just on the Spanish stream or whatever, I don't know, but they actually got them wrong on the graphics. And so we all thought,
they did it for us as well.
Right. And that's the point that to make, though, is that it's not, like, obviously it's not good that they got it wrong, but that actually it wasn't that ludicrous a scenario. Like, I did think to myself, it's a bit edgy picking overpass against G2. Like, they're definitely not terrible on it, you know, but I could have seen SK doing that as, you know, thinking, oh, maybe this is a bit weaker for them. It's a classic map for us. And then, yeah, like you say, G2 thinking, okay, they're good on cash. Yeah, but we have to have some strong maps, so I actually do think of cash as it's at least a minimum in the middle for G2, if not a little bit higher. So yeah, I actually thought that, like, when you looked at the map veto, if SK is the better team, they should really be winning that series, I thought.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think maybe the overpass pick from G2, I'm assuming it had something to do with Kiev, because you'll remember G2 dumpstered SK and Kiev in the group stages. So maybe that had something to do with it. But yeah, I mean, the big thing that this kind of this matchup is, I mean, it was cool on Cash. It was like the Fallen versus Kenny S, right? Which is like, I mean, this just shows when Kenny S is in his top form, which he seems to be right now. If he can keep this consistent, it's going to be crazy. Like, any team he's on is just so fucking tough to beat. Like, he does things with an AWP that, like, just people can't do. And even Fallen at his height was, like, close to doing some of those plays, but this was unreal performance from him. And I don't remember exactly, like, the tactically how that match played out, but just the duel between Kenny S and Fallen on this map was very cool, and it seemed to be something that was going on throughout the series. Yeah, Fallen had another great tournament. This was kind of like
Fallen's
back.
That's the thing, though. What was interesting about that matchup is it actually kind of like added another piece of evidence for me for one of my theories as to how Fallen is such a good AWPer, which is, okay, here's what's bizarre. Most people go the other angle and they go, right, so you're like, I mean, remember, he probably was the best AWPer last year. They go, right, so you're the best AWPer and the best in-game leader at the same time? You're a god. And while, yes, he is a god, believe it or not, from watching him play, I actually think it is specifically because he is the in-game leader and a really good AWPer that makes him so good as an AWPer. Because if you look at how he AWPs, he doesn't just go like standard style, where you go to the same spot every round and you just take on however many people come at you. And then, you know, normally you take out like the 3 guys long range and then the guy who comes up close, you know. First of all, obviously in the early days of Luminosity getting this lineup, he was really famous for those like super aggro peaks as CT, just for information, you know, or to disrupt the setup, right? That in itself is very different from normal AWPing style. But I've noticed another element that he does is he almost specifically uses his AWP to battle the other AWPer of the other team if it's like a star player who has like a key role in the setup on the T side. So the first player I really noticed this was when they initially beat Astralis before Astralis got to the top. That's one of the reasons why they were able to do it at that Oakland tournament, was because actually Fallen, almost every time Device was setting up on T-side of Train, just managed to get like some really good pick or like block him off, you know, like even if he didn't get the pick next time, it's like Device couldn't go to that spot again. So in that sense, not like Fallen was killing the whole team and was dominating the whole scoreboard, but just because he understood tactically what the opposing team was trying to do with their AWP, he could kind of like use it to negate some of that effect. And I felt like even in this series, okay, it's not Fallen's fault his team didn't win, but he actually did a pretty good job considering Kenny S was going off, getting some really good picks on him, doing some good work in that sense. So I feel like in that respect, actually, he's a very different AWPer to anyone I can think of.
Well, it reminds you a little bit, and I mean, I'm assuming it was the reverse, but it reminds you a little bit of how like Stewie calls in Cloud9, but it's probably more like Stewie calls like Fallen, if I'm honest, where, you know, Stewie being that impact player is going to call the tactics about where he wants to go and where he can have the most impact. It seems like Fallen can do that with the AWP as well, where like because he's calling the tactics, he knows where it's critical for that Opera to have a fight, where it's critical for the Opera to take a stand, and exactly what kind of fight he wants the Opera to be taking. And since the Op is such like a positional weapon and can do so much impact just based off, where he's cutting off rotations, or maybe he just gets that one critical pick, it allows the Op to be pretty impactful. So it might be something like in that sense where Fallen's just saying, all right, this is the tactic we're going to call. The Opera needs to take this fight at this time. He needs to support this specific player as he gets close up, and here we go. And he's able to do it. But yeah, it's also, I mean, he when he's on as well, you just see so much versatility. He does things that other Operas don't do. Like he's one of the few Operas that I'll see not just like go for an entry pick at like a range, like get set up to take a long range pick, but he'll actually like entry with the Op, like using it in like the mid range and sometimes even as like a shotgun close up. Like he'll go get in these fights. He'll lead all 5 players, up long A on Cobble and take the opening duel like close up. So just his versatility with the weapon is so impressive.
Thing is, though, the fact that, like, even in that series, they definitely didn't get wrecked by G2. Like, that was a close competitive series. Like, that was an example of, like, 16-12 games where it really was either team could have won those. Because if you remember, the same pattern actually repeated throughout the semis and the final for G2, which is they just had, like, really weak T-sides all the time. But then, admittedly, their T-sides were dynamite. So that's how they got out of trouble every time. So I have to say, like, I don't put too much stock in G2 losing that, beating SK there. Like, on the G2 side of things, yeah, it's really good. And now we have to start wondering, maybe G2 can be like, maybe that's a good matchup for them. Yeah. On the SK side of things, when coldzera is so conspicuously absent as that, and in as much as he just never normally does. Like, it's not like he's a guy where he has 1 out of every 3 tournaments is good, and therefore you're like, okay, well, this is going to happen. It's like, it's the other way around, this very rarely ever happens. And I have to say, that's what was bizarre, was he really was just invisible. Yeah. Like, I remember after the series, I said to the guys that we were doing the cast with, I was like, it's not that you ever remember him making a bad play or you just never saw him in the game. He was never anywhere on the scoreboard. You never wrote his POV. He's non-existent,
It's so retarded that we're having this discussion about what a bad tournament this was for coldzera, and he still ends with a positive rating. He's still at like a 1.04 rating on HLTV. But that's the thing. You just put it exactly right. You just didn't see the impact you normally see out of him. He's usually the guy that's thriving in this system, right? That everything's kind of like, set up and then he just goes on a tear. And you just never saw it the way you have at previous events. For instance, in Sydney, he was superb. But here you just didn't feel any of his impact coming in. So that's kind of a scary thing. Yeah, I think SK is still one of those. It's their team. I remember we had an episode where I said, come the major, I think SK will probably be one of the best teams in the world and be one of the teams challenging for that title come the major. I still think that. I don't think this worries me, but now it's if G2 can build on it, right? Because you even mentioned this could just be a good matchup. We didn't have FaZe, we didn't have Astralis there. There's still big tests for G2 coming up in the future. I'm assuming their next big one is going to be Cologne, if I recall correctly. They'll be there.
They made it to ECS.
Okay. Yep.
So that's like in a week.
That,
but yeah.
So yeah, ECS will be the test for them, and then Cologne after that.
That's actually a killer lineup because that's like the top 4 teams basically at that one.
Yeah, they'll have a good tournament. That'll be fun to watch. That'll be nice to be able to sit back and watch one of those from the comforts of my own home.
To me, like that's almost perfect for where they are because obviously they've had these tournaments where like they got the win at the smaller event at the DreamHack. Now they had like a win over SK, but still we haven't seen them against FaZe, haven't seen them against Astralis. Well, it will be practically impossible to win ECS without playing like SK, FaZe, or Astralis because all the teams are there, So if you get to the playoffs, it's almost guaranteed you're going to get a game against one of those. And in fact, any of those 4, again, let's just mix them up. Fuck it, I'll take FaZe, Astralis again. I'd love to see that matchup again.
Yeah, that'd be so sexy, wouldn't it?
That's like an example of a tournament where this is what's bizarre about the tournament scene at the moment is it's not always the tournaments that have the massive fields because it really is about who you get in the field and then how the groups are drawn and all that sort of stuff, which unfortunately some of that is out of the hands of the tournament organizer, Actually, a problem I have though for G2, this might sound strange considering they look right now like they're peaking, like everything's going great, is that from watching the way they won this tournament, like they won it and they still did ridiculous CT4 spies. Like, I can forgive a lot of T-side force buys because you can make miracles happen with 4 Tech 9s, body armor, and an AK. You can do a lot with that. And like, let's say 2 flashes, right? If you have something in mind or you have a position, like a guy that you can exploit, you can do a lot from that because logically, you kill the first guy, you trade a guy, there's another gun. Now you've got 2 guns and you've got, suddenly you can work yourself into a decent round. Mm-hmm. The problem is, it's when you're doing these, like, you should have seen some of the buys. Like on CT side, they had some ridiculous ones where it's like they were using the old envious logic, right? Which used to go like this. Yeah, but if we win this round, we break their money. And it's like, yes, but if you lose this round, you are ultra fucked for the next 2 rounds. Like your money is beyond broken at that point. Yeah. Like, and the problem is, the fact that they won while doing it tells me they will just continue doing it. Like, they're not going to look at this game. They're not going to be like the perfectionists, right, who look at the game and go, we won, but what should we switch up? I can tell you from knowing these guys, they think it went great. They think it like that. The way that money system works is how it's meant to go.
Listen, you can't change it all at once, Duncan. Baby steps. We know they're going to do this. They're always going to like that.
But this is the problem, though.
Yeah,
think of how crazy
it's always going to be that way.
I was thinking of how nuts this is. So at the moment, the best player in G2 is Kenny S. And yet they are a team who do these 2 things constantly. 1, Shox buys an AWP himself. Right, yeah. There's money out the economy that could be an AWP for Kenny S. That might be like 1, 2 AWPs that Kenny S won't get each half if they're broke for the rest of the rounds that he would otherwise. And then secondly, they force buy all the time as well. Yeah. So even Kenny S himself is going onto a FAMAS or a fucking 5.7 or whatever, a UMP or something. Like, what's mad about that is, it just shows how weird teams are because in no traditional team sport would any team ever play that way. Like, if your star player in the NFL is a fucking running back, you're not just going to play some fucking short range passing game all day long and never get him involved.
Well,
you're gonna base it unless you're like the 2-yard line or something. But you know what I mean? Like that is just as a general approach, that's just so mad, and just be like, well, he'll get his whenever. Every now and then we'll give him the ball. Like, what's bizarre is they're already very good, but they're one of the only teams I can see who's an elite level team who have like an obvious flaw in their own approach to maximizing their own strengths.
Yeah, it worked at this event. In the future, they'll get punished for that. But that was how they were in the past as well, in the different like LDLC and even the NV lineups. Is like, yeah, when it works, it's like cool. Like we know it can work from time to time, but that's the one down the stretch in tournaments. At some point, that's going to bite them again. But listen, they're getting very fortunate at the moment because Body has turned out to be like an exceptional player at this level. There was a lot of controversy over him being brought into the team over Scream when it was formed, and I know I personally liked it because I liked what I saw at a Body last year before the super team was made, but he's become exceptionally better. NBK is hitting a really, really nice level. Even in games, like the crazy thing about NBK in this tournament, even in games where like he went like negative or he didn't have as many kills or whatever it might have been, he still put up like massive ADR stats. He was still like, there were some games, and I'm looking right now at the cash stats, there were more, but this is just an example. Against SK, went 18 and 21, but he had 86 ADR, which is the highest on his team. Kenny's up there with 25, Shox with 22, but NBK's topping out the ADR scoreboard. That's huge impact to have as a player, even if you're not getting the kills. And if they have NBK consistently like at that level, that's going to remain to be a dangerous team. Especially considering you still have Apex, who we don't even have to touch on, but we all know like when he can just blow up and take over a map. But they actually, surprisingly, if NBK can be consistent, they have a very, very deep roster now because Body has turned out to be such a good player. All of a sudden, the conversation around G2 is more than just Kenny and Shox, right? As much as we want to see them go away from that double op. Actually, a lot of teams are relying on double ops at the moment. Yeah. But this G2 roster can be very, very deep, and I think that kind of is going to catch people off guard because NBK's been like that, the overqualified support player. Body has been like this new player that like everyone is like seeing how good he can be, but I think now we're getting a sense for it, and now this is like a 5-man deep roster.
Plus, right now, after watching the 4 lands they've played, it's absolutely not Shox. Like he's in nowhere the star player. But here's what's crazy. Bearing in mind he is the in-game leader, obviously he still frags fine for an in-game leader and is like overqualified skill-wise for that position. Now, admittedly, he obviously isn't as cerebral as a lot of the in-game leaders. But I have to say, this just shows how good this team is at the moment. He had a whole bunch of games at this tournament where he was like very low number of frags. Like actually, in a lot of the force buys, he wasn't always that great. But every single big game they had, he would have at least one like clutch that he would just win by himself in like classic fashion. So what's mad is if he just wants to be some sort of like like ridiculous, like Zipnik's 2.0 smack. He is insanely good at clutches and still remains so. So if he's going to be your worst player and just win a few clutches and the odd pistol round for you, like you're going to have a pretty good team at that point in time.
Well, that's the thing, right?
When MBK and Shox are your worst players, you probably got a pretty fucking good team.
Yeah, you're pretty solid. No, but that's the cool thing. Like Shox can be like he could be the motherfucker, like the lead from behind general, right? Who's like at the back of the lines, sends all the troops forward, gets them all killed, and then at the end of the round, when he doesn't have to think on like a team-wide scale, and he's just in a 1-on-2 or a 1-on-1, then he can just like pick it up and just have insane impact. So that's kind of a cool thing that G2 has for him.
Do you actually think that G2 could win the major? I mean, you're going to get a chance to change it because you'll see ECS and Cologne. But do you think right now with this team, could they win the major?
They certainly have the skill for it. I don't think they will. I don't think they have a good chance of it. But I mean, if everything goes right, yeah, it'll be like seeing what form they're in leading up to the major. Also, because we have to remember, this is like the first really good post-group stage run we've seen out of this team, right? And like you said, it's a weakened field, so it's not like telling a whole lot in terms of their placement within the entirety of the professional scene. But I mean, they can if everything goes right. We'll just have to see, because if they go into ECS and look bad again, then it's kind of like, does it actually take away from this win since it was a weaker field? Does it show us some of those flaws? I think like you mentioned, that force buy, the double op tendencies, those two things, when they seem so out of place on a team, it just really feels like that's going to kneecap them in some kind of a major run, in some kind of a deep run at a tournament against the Astralis, against the FaZe, because Astralis doesn't make those mistakes, and FaZe can do the force buys. We saw those two teams go head to head in a game purely of force buys. We basically saw a pistol match out of the two of them, and we've seen FaZe able to overcome in that situation. So they're going to have teams that will take huge advantage of that, much more than North was able to, much more than SK was able to. Actually, we should say, I mean, part of this Overpass series that they had, I mean, it's pretty abysmal. Do you think that SK only got 2 rounds on their T side? All things considering this is like the map that they're known for being so dangerous on, and like really innovative on the T side, and how they kind of showed how the T side should be played. For them to have dropped off this much on the T side, I mean, I know it's only one map, but that's pretty abysmal, I think, in my opinion, for SK.
I mean, the thing is, I actually feel like G2, their big problem isn't even like the skill level of the team and the potential and all that. Like, as a team, they're clearly fantastic. It's just that their problem is, if you think of the trio of teams where you know at least 1 or 2 of these would be in your way to win the major, so it is SK, FaZe, Astralis. Okay, so against SK, yeah, they did great here, but that's with no Cold Zero. So put Cold Zero in there. I'd love to see that match again, run that one back. Then think about FaZe. That's the one where, if you remember, they had that series at Star Series, which was their first big LAN, where that was just like, okay, you like to force buy? I like to mini half force buy. Like, you like a force buy, bro? I put a force buy in your force buy, so now you must force buy. Like some sort of mad logic. Like they were trying to play like chicken in traffic, and at the end, like someone crawled out of the wreckage, but no one was in like great shape after that one. If you remember, that was a nightmare.
In the end, the fucking van jumps the curb and runs over all. Oh, that's actually like a really bad analogy to make, isn't it? No, but in the end, like that's where like all the viewers just get hit.
Yeah, yikes. See, Moses meant that just as a general metaphor that could happen with a truck. Not all trucks, Moses. Not all. Oh. Anyway, I got what you were meaning there.
You really do hate to see that, don't you?
You do. Really you do. Hate to see missteps made in podcasts. No, here's the thing. I know what you mean, though. Yeah. No, but my point there is like, I mean, here's the thing, by the way. I'm not saying that's great for FaZe as any of the equation. That could also be the end of FaZe if they just start going into some mad force buy war with them, you know? I mean, I guess essentially it's the opposite of an arms race, isn't it? Because actually you're both rushing to get smaller and smaller guns that do less and less to each other. So I don't really understand that premise. But okay, so you got your FaZe one there. And then the third one, the one we haven't seen yet, the Astralis versus G2, that's the one actually, if I'm G2, I'd be most worried about. Because like we're saying here, with these like dodgy CT sides and with all this force buying, I feel like that's where a team like Astralis is like custom made to just fuck you up hard. Like when you're doing all those ridiculous force buys and they don't just die to them, you're going to be in so much trouble. And they have, you know, that like slow T-side style that they have, that pick-off style. That's so good against people who have like, like a fucking 5-7 and a UMP and they're at medium range. Like, that's a nightmare to play against.
If you're force buying against like a device with an AWP who like changes up every single position of where he's going to get a pick, and he's going to be set up by teammates specifically designed to get him kills, and all you've got is like a UMP or a CZ or a Deagle, like he's going to win that duel more often than not. Actually, I think Guardian said a really, really good thing about Astralis, which is just, I mean, he put in that interview that he gave, I think it was just, he gave it at EPL, but it was just released, I think, yesterday or 2 days ago.
Okay.
And he basically just said Astralis is like easy to play against just because he kind of said what's coming, like you know what they're doing. It's just they don't make mistakes. And that's where it's difficult, because pretty much every team at the pro level makes mistakes at one part. But I mean, it is very accurate. They don't make zero mistakes, but I mean that's a little bit hyperbole. But they play such a solid fundamental game in terms of like theoretical Counter-Strike that's where they beat you, right? They just like make the fewest mistakes, and so that's something that I don't think G2 is going to be able to exploit in that sense. Because when you are winning so many force buys, you're usually relying on, it's like, some nice shots from Deagle. The pistols can be very overpowered at times in certain situations, but you're also relying on the other team making a misstep, someone overextending, allowing you to get that kill, someone not being in the position to trade properly, something along those lines. That's
why I always say when it gets to series play, you don't beat Astralis by them just playing like shit. Like, that hasn't really happened. I mean, the closest you could come is maybe those maps in the like ELEAGUE Season 2 final. That's about the closest they've come to playing badly, And even then, like, that was mainly like device part of the time, and then some of the others were doing all right, You mainly have to have either, it has to be like that where, an Optic overperforms, or you just have to literally be one of the best teams playing lights out CS, Like, if you can play like FaZe did on the second half of Inferno at Star Series, you can win. But we don't even know if FaZe can do that every time. Like, very few teams can, So that's the thing with that style. It's great for being consistent. It's no wonder they've made top 4 at all these tournaments, It's going to get you so far through a tournament, no matter how your team's level is, just because it's a really consistent approach to the game. But you're definitely right in as much as the one negative to it is that since people know where you are, if you have like individuals just play like way above the rim, like really, really high level, they could exploit it. The point is they can't even do that consistently though. So I feel like it is a good approach. It's funny that Guardian would say that though, because obviously like Na'Vi can't do shit right now, especially not against Astralis, obviously.
His next line was like, I play a lot of games other than Counter-Strike, and it has decreased my level, and I will only be playing Counter-Strike from now on. It will be CS, CS, CS. And I'm just like, well, that's like a year late, isn't it? Like, that should have happened a while back. That team, Na'Vi, is just so disappointing at the moment. That's atrocious. But, I'm actually. Do you think FaZe is going to be at the same level they were at in like Sydney and everything like that? And I mean, they've had like a month off now, a little over a month off going into ECS. That'll be their first tournament in some time.
Well, the bizarre thing about FaZe that a lot of people don't realize is, despite all these fantastic results, except for Sydney, every other tournament, they were the ones where someone else, well, it was always North, would fuck up their side of the bracket, and they would get to play, for example, Immortals in the semi-finals of fucking Katowice, and then they played Hellraisers in the semi-final of Starseas, and then it's only when it got to Sydney, finally, like, okay, well, at least it's Astralis in the semi-finals, like, that's big. So yeah, FaZe has done great against Astralis, and in best of ones, they're very good, but we haven't actually seen them play many series. Like, they haven't played the other big teams. We haven't seen them play Na'Vi in a series or we haven't seen them play North in a series, actually, believe it or not, because obviously North fucks it up every time. So that's my big question. It's like, I think FaZe put them against Astralis or maybe SK or whatever. That would be fun, but I want to actually see them against the middling teams. Like, I'd love to see, here's what would be a really great matchup no one's thinking about right now. Get one of the next big tournaments where they're both at. So it could be something like Cologne, and put this FaZe against Virtus.pro.
Yeah.
There's a fun one, right?
Well, I mean,
no one's even seen VP for so long. How are you going to counter-strat that?
Well, you might not have to, right? If they just show up and shit the bed. But yeah, no. One of the things that we talk, I think we talked about this in other games or other episodes, is I don't know if FaZe, this Astralis like victories they have over Astralis at Starlat or at Sydney. This seems like very like matchup and like situational, right? Like, it doesn't feel like FaZe. I think we said it last one. I don't think FaZe can beat SK in a series. I don't think FaZe can beat like like Astralis just seems to be like the one team they have this weird edge over. But if you put them against like an SK, if you put them against like a VP, it just feels like they're going to struggle like mightily in a BO3 series. Even North, I feel like they would struggle even with North's issues. G2 maybe even, that would be cool to see again after Starladder. But they just feel like a team that for some reason has this like edge over Astralis, that they can beat Astralis, but against other teams, I think they're really going to get exposed or have a tough time beating in BO3s or BO5s.
I mean, I'm certainly quite curious to see what happened when they play different styles of teams. That's the part I want to see. Because as I kind of pointed out there, even some of the underdogs they're playing, like, yeah, okay, I'll give you Hellraisers. They actually have improved and they look pretty solid. But like that Immortals one was like, to me, that was like a free pass to the fucking final of that Katowice. Like, come on, man. Even with the old lineup, yeah. Immortals was like a solid team, but they were like a team where like there was a hard cap on how far they were ever going to go. Like that was their best run. They made it to the top 4 and even then got wrecked by Nico and FaZe basically. So
it was also one of the few events that Henny performed at a crazy level. He always does well in Poland for whatever reason. But it's also, I mean, you look at the flip side. This was when like Nico had just been in the team for like a week, so it was just full blown like Nico, do whatever the fuck you want. Like we don't have strats. Nico, just go fucking nuts, and he did. Like you have to think about that as well, right? Because the Nico we saw in that Katowice isn't the same Nico that we're seeing within this roster right now.
Oh, I tell you something that we should definitely discuss this while we're on the topic is obviously this week is the Clash for Cash.
Ooh.
And you will be there, but only as a commentator, I noticed, not as an analyst.
Only as a commentator.
Well, you have to understand, I know to you, Moses, and to other commentators, you think that is the superior job. But as Henry G is well aware from spending time around me, it is actually an inferior job. So obviously, I know the answer already, Moses. You wanted the week off. You just wanted to take it easy.
I want the caster lifestyle, man.
Talk a little bit about the games. You didn't want to have to hold up games for 20 minutes, giving your theories about things while players wait to start, and all other conspiracy theories that retards imagine are a real thing. So okay, you're going there as a caster. So you're doing it with Anders, right?
Yep. Yes.
Does that mean that you basically just do the color roll?
Yeah, usually with Anders and I mean, it's stick to pretty much hard color. He's, I'm going to let him do the hype situation. It's going to let him bring the excitement, the feeling. And I'm going to be an analyst just during the live game, Duncan. I'm going to have plenty of time to get my thoughts out there.
Yeah. And obviously, Scoots will absolutely fill your position.
He will tear that desk up. He's going to get all up in that ass.
I mean, luckily there's only one game for him this time, so just make sure you got the notes for the two teams. If you've got that, you're home free at that point in time. Would be epic, though, if he just came up like, yep, they've won in photo sometime. Oh, that's Nip.
The irony, Duncan, is that, since we did both E-League seasons in the major for E-League on the desk, like at times like the desk segments were just so short and it was just kind of like, it was so structured that it was, you couldn't even really go in depth on anything.
Yeah.
I think this time they actually have a desk plan that is actually pretty in depth.
Reasonable, absolutely reasonable. I'd expect nothing less, Moses. That is absolute madness, isn't it? Yeah. Absolute madness. Okay,
it's gonna be funny.
So here's the question then. Obviously, it's now like, for example, when I put my rankings out today, Astralis now no longer has a trophy on there. Like the last win they had was in early March, so we've now passed the 3-month span of that. Now we're through to a time where they're no longer the number ones, the top dogs. But really, that Clash for Cash feels like it has fucking nothing to do with Astralis. The whole thing is VP right now exists in what I call like a black box environment, where aside from online play, no one, including probably VP, has any clue what VP's like on LAN. No one has. Yeah. You don't know if they're going to be good, if they're going to be terrible. I mean, you could say on one level, if I wanted to like give people some hope, I would say this: it's only one match. They don't have to like play a whole group stage and then go through the playoffs and then all they have to do is come in mentally strong enough to play this one series and play at a good level, and then they could be like the old VP. But then again, there's also the other element where it's like no one's seen them in a long time, and there's also, you've got to at least account for the fact maybe they turn up and it's just a fucking whimper and Astralis just takes like the freest 250k ever, you know. Well, I mean, I can't say that. Respect to WESG and everything that they did. Because I think that was worth like 5th place or something, you know, that tournament.
Well, the best part about that event is that Virtus.pro is there as well. And normally
they
you just hand it over to them and they went out like outside the top 4.
They gave Kingwin, like, they were like, you take all the money.
It was Envy that won it, and I remember like just it was so funny seeing all the Envy guys after all their struggles for so long at the major in Atlanta at the end of like 2 weeks after that event. And they were like, yeah, it was quite nice just, you know, winning like once VP got knocked out, they were just like, yeah, it was quite nice getting a free championship and a free shit ton of money and just, you know, have something.
The stupidest part, Moses, is that you do realize now that like Kenny S has won like well over $1 million this year. Not him personally, like his teams, obviously, right. But that alone is so ridiculous, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's madness.
The best thing was, if you ever saw Six's face when they won, is he had like just like a weird expression on his face. Like he was obviously like happy, but like if you win 900k, right, in any reasonable world, that should be like, yeah, we are the champion. And none of them really had that look. They all had like a bemused look on their face, like, I have no idea what's going on.
How did we win this? We have already broken up. We already know we are going to change teams after this event. How has this happened? Yeah, think of it now. Also, like, what Happy's prize money for the year has to be like skyrocketed, like massively boosted.
Yeah,
like that's crazy to think about,
mate. I mean, we won't go into that too much, but this was like a perfect example of where, you know, we always make the joke, right, that to actually have hope and to have it, have your feelings completely dashed, you must have a little bit of hope first, right? You have to believe it's possible, and then it's the disappointment and how underwhelming you feel that really like kicks you in the stomach, you know? So what's beautiful is, after like the first 2 days of EPL, all the envious fans were like, RPK is just 17 times better now, and they are a really good team. And then they play Team Liquid, who, by the way, we still don't even know if they're any good, barely steal map 1. And I mean steal, like straight daylight robbery, and then just get their shit pushed in completely on the next 2 maps. And it's like, well, wake up, Billy. It's like, what's going on? I was hopping on a golden Pogo-stick. What's that in my ass? Oh, my God. Like it was just over, Moses, like 1 day later. Well, actually, we had to wait 2 days, remember, to see those matches or whatever, but it was like a couple of days later.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot one thing. Ooh. This is a detail a lot of people missed, remember. Remember, I'd been keeping track of it. G2 winning made the first team in Counter-Strike to play in that format and skip to the semis, winning the tournament. It's finally happened. It only took about, like, I think this was like the 10th tournament or something absolutely mental,
even more, yeah. Well, I mean, whoever won that final was going to break that curse, right? Because North did the same exact thing. So you knew going into that it was just
But luckily it was North, so I knew that wasn't going to happen. So.
That format is so weird to me because I really, really like it from scheduling purposes. Obviously, it makes our days easier as on the desk and everything, but like on a competition level, it just sucks not having to go like have that whole quarterfinal like run and everything like that.
Yeah, that's my big problem because it, like, for example, like half the stuff I was talking about earlier about FaZe, like, you know, they haven't really they've only played Immortals at Katowice. Well, they would have played an extra team, so make that anyone. Think about the teams in the other group who were like in last place. It could have been like, let me think. Who was third? I think Na'Vi was third in that group. You know, it could have been like a Na'Vi or a VP, or, you know, if you'd let an extra team through the group, you know.
Yep.
Whoever you'd have played, it gives you more experience though, so you can show off more. Also, here's the key thing, right? Even though there are a lot of formats that are like this, and I get that in some sense they want to reward people, there's something a bit bizarre to me. Like, if the team ends up winning the tournament and they skipped it, all you really did is have the best team not play an extra series. Well, that's the team you want to see play. Like, imagine if, like, Michael Jordan's Bulls just skipped to the final. And it was like, okay, well, you're the best, you won, but actually we've just missed a classic series against this team, and then this underdog never got to take a game off you. So, yeah, I agree. My philosophy on this format is, as long as there's only a couple of them, fair enough, you know, pepper those in the calendar. I just hope this never becomes the main format, because I think that those aspects do suck, you know?
Yeah. It's the tough part of like having events in stadiums where you have to like manage how long viewers are going to actually be sitting in a stadium per day, and you have to manage all the things you can do outside of it and everything like that. So yeah, it'll be tough it'll be interesting to see moving forward. I get the feeling we're going to see it a lot more this year.
Thing is, though, this is why I'll tell you this, Moses. Everyone who doesn't follow Dota still argues, I mean, League of Legends is even worse, mate, because they have even more limited formats. People argue, like, yeah, but you have to understand scheduling, and I don't even know if it'd be possible to have more games. And I'm like, Dota exists. So in a recent tournament in Dota, Moses, they actually had a best-of-3 Swiss system into a whole playoff bracket.
Holy shit.
And they only did it in, like, a week, like we have for our big tournaments. So all I'm saying is, they don't fuck around.
That's fucking
Think about
baller.
that. Yeah,
That's
best
baller.
of 3 Swiss system. How sick is that? Like, here's the thing, dude. You know they used to have where before it was GSL system, but no one went out and you just went to the lower bracket if you were in the bottom 2. So then they were like, we're going to switch it up. It's like they tripped over, fucked around, and then got an even better system for single elim. Like, yeah, we're also going to have a way better system for single elim tournaments as well. Meanwhile, in the other worlds, like back in the land of Counter-Strike, they're like rubbing 2 sticks together. Nah, it'll never happen, mate. You'll never get fire out of those. You got to wait till lightning strike. See ya. It's like
here's the biggest issue, and this is where I'm just going to be like massively critical of players, and even ESL to a certain degree. But because players have so much fucking say in tournament formats, this is why they're all shit. Because obviously, players are going to want to have a situation where they can play as many games with as little risk of actually being eliminated from the tournament. They want every chance to have a bad game and able to recover from it. That has zero excitement in tournament formats. Think about the Pro League Finals. This had me so tilted on day one. We waited all season. It was like a 4-month-long season watching all those online matches, which is essentially a massive group stage, to go to the tournament, have another group stage where there was no excitement in any of the games because of the format. And then the most exciting games that you could have that you watched were the playoff ones in Group A, where like it was one of Fnatic or SK was going to get eliminated in the groups. Yeah, and it was like just fucking overtime. It was just like 6 rounds of overtime format, and it's like, how have I waited 4 months long for the best matches of this season, and all of a sudden it's this shit? Where did that go wrong? And that's where you get as a viewer, where it's like, players should not be dictating the formats, because obviously they want the least important matches, so they always have a chance to recover from a bad game. You want to have the BO1s. The most exciting game I've ever fucking seen in Counter-Strike, well, I mean, maybe not the most exciting, but one of the most exciting was that TSM versus Fnatic at Pro League Season 1, where it was a best-of-1 on Overpass for elimination. That was hype as fuck. We need that back. We need that kind of shit. So, I mean, I think the players really should never, ever be allowed. I mean, yes, they should have a say. They should be able to express concerns. But when it comes down to it, like, they cannot be the ones voting on these formats, because they're always going to be the ones best for them.
Like, here's the main issue that's the problem here, right? Yes, ESL does a lot of things in a non-optimal manner, and they do definitely fuck up some things in terms of scheduling or not planning certain things. But the problem is, because everyone goes so hard at ESL for anything they do wrong, it means that as a result, especially because players have massive pull over the CS community in terms of social media, if they can get the players on their side, I think they feel like, right, that's half the battle won. Because you notice, right, here's how you know that this will not get resolved. Because right after the tournament, did you see what the SK and G2 players were all tweeting? They were like, one of the best ESL tournaments ever run. This was fantastic, you know, because they did well in it, you know. It's only the person who gets fucked by the tiebreaker who's like, what is this system? This is unfair. And then every team that goes through is like, it seems perfectly fair to me. Like, just kill yourself. Like, does that need to happen?
And then you look at that team and you're like, I hope you get fucked next event. I hope you're the one who gets fucking wrecked. And then we'll see what you're saying. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Just, I mean, and that's also the fault of ESL in the sense that since they've had some bad tournaments in the past, since they've fucked up a couple things here and there, they're not really in a position to fight public opinion, are they? So they have to do something. But certainly, like, it's actually kind of funny. It's become a little bit of like a meme to us, because us as in talent, and even I think a lot of the players as well. ESL's tournaments this year have been sick. They're like, I mean, there have been some minor production issues, but like in terms of like how they take care, in terms of, you know, fixing technical issues when they occur, it's all very quick. I think they've done an incredible job between Sydney and Pro League, two of the best events, and even Katowice, some of the best events I've ever worked for ESL. So the fact that whenever there's like a minor production issue in the community, since it's ESL, it's become like a meme where it just gets blown up beyond proportion, where every small mistake is like some massive fucking issue, which is like, fuck these guys. You know, Valve should just, you know,
my favorite
never allow them to play Counter-Strike ever. Never
was the one where people implied that if you get 2 Asian players' names wrong, that's racism. Like, wait a second, let's just examine that for a second. So your premise you're stating is that the guy whose job is to make the graphics is making some sort of political politically charged racist statement that he wants everyone to know that he thinks these people are identical and that he doesn't respect them because they're race? Or was it just an error? And the best thing is it actually turned out it wasn't even a human error. It was literally like, well, I mean, it was in terms of whoever set that system up, but it was literally the system was drawing the wrong player names, basically. So it wasn't, what, so the fucking computers are racist, is it? So you've got fucking what, Johnny 5 KKK member or something? Jesus Christ, what is this?
I was fucking
Old
mad,
school
wasn't it?
reference there, of course. I haven't watched any recent movies, mate. I don't know, Big Hero 6 or something. What do kids watch nowadays? That was some. I think that was a movie, Moses.
It was.
That's all I know, though.
It was a sad one, Big Hero 6.
Come on, mate. They're all sad. Someone's mother dies, and some hero has. Yeah, it's not. That's the only way they could somehow think about what a fucked up statement that is about our civilization. You can't create a meaningful story for children without someone being killed.
Yeah, I know, it's fucked up.
Why is that a thing?
Someone always dead. It's unreal. Yeah. No, but the funniest part about that fuck up from ESO was that it happened the next day, and I was in the production meeting at the end of the day. Well, they were like, yeah, some unfortunate things, like the names on the graphics and everything. So what we're gonna do is bring everyone in 30 minutes early tomorrow. Make sure that doesn't happen again. We're gonna get it fixed, and then it happened again on day 2, and I just started fucking cracking up. I thought that was fucking hilarious. But obviously those small mistakes like just build up over time, and that's why the community has such a negative opinion of ESL. But I mean, all things considered, they've done a great job this year in improvement, and it's just kind of funny watching the community still blow up over these small things that, you know, other tournament organizers do those mistakes as well and don't get the Reddit threads. So like it is just kind of funny the standing that the ESL has, and obviously that's their problem from doing it so much in the past. But
they did kind of make their own bed as well to some degree.
Yeah.
Well, like for example, because they did spam that line about being the industry leader, that will get you more flack than anyone else.
Yeah.
Like ECS doesn't say that all the time. And also, secondly, they did in the past mismanage PR so much by sort of like they're the only company I've ever seen, Moses. You know, like the standard way you do it in America is if anything's wrong, you do that bullshit of like the customer's always right. So, you know, you come on and you're like, we apologize for the way this has been handled. We will immediately, like instead ESL would come in and go like, it's not even really our fault in a way. It's your fault. Fuck you. It's like, and everyone's like, get them even worse. Like that really was like the old approach. They used to think, yeah, but technically it's not our fault. It's like, that's definitely not what people want to hear, is it? Like,
it was so bad. It's so bad. I was talking to another tournament organizer like a month ago, and they were just like, yeah, well, one of the good things that ESL has going for it is their PR. And I was like, what? I was like, how? No.
They have improved a bit more now.
Well, they've had to, haven't they? Because they've done it so
true.
badly in the past. They've had to recover from so much. But here's something we can go into. Speaking of ESL, what do you think of this Intel thing? The what are they calling it?
Grand Slam or something.
Yeah, the Grand Slam.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. First of all, one last note I'll say on the ESL thing is that just to contrast, right? Remember, it's not like the only EPL exists. We have ECS as well. Yeah. Right. So everyone complains, rightfully so, you know, oh, we've got to do something with the format, invite more European teams. ECS only invites 4 European teams. Now, they locked out that the best 4 made it. But they could have had a LAN where, dude, imagine if their LAN had been all upsets. The finals for ECS are Team Liquid, Optic, Envious, Mouse Sports, Hellraisers. Like, fuck, kill me now. Like, I don't want to watch DreamHack tours. Thank you. What the fuck is this shit? Like, this is your, you know, they just got lucky, those motherfuckers. Like, they actually have a worse format if you think about it. By the way, I'm going to be at that event, so they do actually hire some very good talent now. So they make up for, you know, it's all swings and roundabouts. Okay, so here's the thing about the Grand Prix thing, Moses, the Grand Slam or whatever. Probably the funniest part of it all, right, is remember, this is the premise, Moses. Right, we've thought up a really cool marketing idea, which is that we already have all these tournaments, and yeah, we already have these tournaments. Okay, so we have these tournaments, and you win massive amounts of prize money, and you already get a lot of exposure for going to them. Yeah, I'm with you so far. So what we want to do is, if someone did exceptionally well and really dominated, we'll just give them $1 million. What do you mean $1 million? Just $1 million for free. Even though they already get all the money for winning the tournaments and the exposure, and that's their job anyway, we will just give them $1 million for free. Now, this is what the CS fan then just goes, yeah, but that's going to be really hard to do, though. Did you miss the part where you get it for free? Like, you already won the tournaments and got all the exposure, and I'm just giving you $1 million for free. Like, you realize I'm not obliged to do this.
It should be easier to get $1 million.
So no, but someone was literally explaining, like, well, you know, it's quite unlikely someone will be able to do that. And then, like, Hotbid from ESL just said, like, well, if it was easy, it wouldn't be worth $1 million. Would it? Like, that is actually that part had me rolling, mate, because that is like so perfect for like CS people. Like, yeah, but what if no one does it then? I'm doing it for free. I don't even have to do this.
And not to mention, you want to make
$1 million for fuck's sake. Like
even outside the money, you want something that is going to be like impressive, right? You want something that has some prestige behind it.
Think about how many people had to get killed every time Pablo Escobar made $1 million. All you have to do is win fucking 4 tournaments in a video game, you nerd. And then someone's like, yeah, but what if I only win 3? You don't get the $1 million. It's free. It's not even part of it. What? You still got all the other prize money. It's not like you get nothing. It's not like at the end, Moses, it's all or nothing. And they're like, well, you did win 3 huge tournaments and you were 1 round away. Fuck you. You get nothing.
You know what my favorite part about this whole thing is? It's actually the $100,000 that goes to any team that beats the potential Grand Slam winner. That is so fucking baller.
Well, here's the thing, Moses.
Like creating a rivalry for $100,000.
A lot of fans on that one as well spazzed out, right? And they said quite naively, yeah, but then there'll be all, collusion, because if I'm about to get the $1 million and you're the only one who can beat me, I just give you, $300,000 and then you actually just let me win. No. Let me just explain to you how Counter-Strike works. Have you seen how incredibly petty G2 was with Config for talking shit? How incredibly petty, players will be about all of them, right? They don't care that they would get less money. And by the way, for not match fixing for a massive amount of money, that probably you could go to jail for that. Like, we're talking this isn't like iBuyPower levels. This is like $1 million. Again, Pablo Escobar shot dead by the FBI or whatever, like ATF, whatever it was, like that kind of money, you can't fuck around with that, So, but here's the thing, right? Those teams would think it was so funny if they could win, even if they only get $100,000. If they know that they stopped, like Astralis, for example, for winning the $1 million, they would love that. They would absolutely do that 100%. That's the ultimate troll move, right? Like, you fuck around. You did it when you're $1 million. That would be the sickest move ever, right? And by the way, that would be a hell of a rivalry right there, right?
Oh, it's so good.
You denied us from winning a free $1 million.
And that's $100,000 on top of winning the tournament, right?
Yeah,
because it has to happen in the grand final. So it's just, oh my god, dude, it's gonna be so good. It's gonna be so epic. Yeah. My big worry with this is it's such a cool idea, and if it's executed properly, it will be so fucking epic, right? It's like another tournament circuit within the tournament circuit. So you can make this so cool. Yeah. My worry is that there's not going to be any supplemental content around it, right? Like, imagine if throughout the year,
it should be like the road to the million. Everyone that you win, they follow you.
The grand YouTube videos of the Grand Slam chase, highlighting all the teams that are winning events as they go on, and all that shit, and doing in-depth content pieces on the players and the teams. I want that kind of supplemental content going into these events, and I'm worried that we're not going to get it. I'm worried that this is only they've done the first half properly, right? The announcement, getting this arranged, no small feat. The second half could just make this fucking epic.
Here's the thing that's very clever about it, though. Right, last year I got a bit tilted where IEM Oakland was coming up. We had all those sick teams, then last minute VP dropped out. And at the time, VP was ranked number 1. Essentially, this move just means none of those teams will drop out. There won't be an Astralis skip ESL Cologne in the future. In theory, for this next run of tournaments, everyone who can will go to every IEM, and obviously qualifying for EPL was never based on that anyway, but every IEM, these top, the top 4 teams can go to, they will all be at, for sure, because remember, you do win a free $1 million if you do it. Yeah. And these are good events anyway.
Yeah, they're sick events to go to. I still think ESL 1 Cologne would be sketchy. I still don't think Astralis would go to that just because it's so close to the major. But yeah. Also, I mean, look at it this way: if we're gonna, there's always up in arms when some league is trying to get any kind of exclusivity over teams. This is a way to not have exclusivity, but to have your events massively prioritized, right? Yeah, if you're a team and you've won 2 ESL events in the past month. Obviously, you're going to be signing up for every fucking ESL event to end the year. Everything coming up to try and get those 4 wins in the 10. So that's kind of a sick little bonus.
Here's the interesting one, Moses. So as yet, no one knows what the actual format of that ELEAGUE Premier was. If you remember, it was announced as doesn't it start the beginning of September and run through to the very beginning of October or something like that, wasn't it? It was a month long, I think. It was the rough span.
You mean the next season of ELEAGUE?
Yeah.
Is it actually called the E-League Premier?
They did an announcement about it a while ago. I'll see if I can find it. It just said like announcing the E-League Premier.
I don't think they gave how long it would be, but yeah, it starts I think September 6th or 4th, maybe
something like that.
Yeah, it's like no, it'd be. I guess it would have to be the 8th because that's Friday. Last season they did Friday, Saturday. Yeah, I don't know, but it's early September. It's like the first week of September, I think. But yeah, obviously that season starts kind of overlapping with Malmo and with.
New York's later in that month, right?
Yeah.
So that's where it gets interesting because, as you're saying, there's no exclusivity there. They're not saying you have to compete in our tournament. The problem is, though, it ups the ante for everyone else, which is like, what are you going to do to make me go to your tournament?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's ESL now has that, right? So great. Also, this is just a little bit of a cherry on the top, but a nice little kick in the dick to G2 saying, we have started this with ESL Pro League season.
It's pretty good, right? Yeah.
You guys have one of the 4 tournaments needed for $1 million. Oh, I take that back. It starts at Cologne. Fuck off.
Yeah, because they made like an error in the in the press release.
Oh, I'm assuming maybe they thought they were going to have the deal ready to be
Could have
announced.
Been, yeah. They just had it ready to go. Yeah.
Yep.
Oops, very sorry.
That's so fucking epic.
I know it is, isn't it?
Shall we move on to Friberg?
Oh, I have a question for you, though.
Yeah.
So to return before we leave that topic, do you actually believe for the Clash for Cash that VP can win? Do you think it'll happen? Or do you, like, put it this way, at the moment, I'll be totally honest. Like, I think Astralis is going to win it. I just hope it's a good game. That's the mindset I'm going in with. At the moment, despite all the things VP's done, like, here's the thing about Virtus.pro, okay? They actually haven't won that many big tournaments when you consider how long they've been together, you know. They win like a couple a year, and what happens is when they're really in insane form, yeah, they win the one. But in general, that's usually what they do. They give the teams that do win the big tournament the good run, you know. So it's not like they're just a miracle team entirely. So I don't know if I kind of feel like Astralis is just going to win that, dude.
Yeah, I get that feeling as well. I mean, it's another one of those stupid things. It always fucking sucks talking about Virtus.pro in this sense, but it's just like, do they show up? If they show up, they've got a chance. They can obviously beat anyone. I mean, even in that Guardian interview, even after like 2 months of Virtus.pro sucking, he just said Virtus.pro is always the hardest team to play against. They can. It's just, will they? Probably not, I don't think.
I mean, I do think Astralis could do them a favour. You know, like over the last year or so where Nip was already off the boil most of the time, but every time they played Astralis, like, it's like it leveled the level of both teams out. It didn't matter how good Astralis was. They could never kind of get away from Nip because the whole matchup had, like, you know, Nip knows Astralis might choke and Astralis is like, shit, it's Nip. I feel like that could be a factor, so maybe that's how the game evens out. But it just seems unrealistic to expect VP to just forget everything for the last 3 months and just be super amazing again.
Yeah, it does. And especially because I think, Pasha just had his second daughter?
They don't learn, do they? They don't learn. Again, think of it as a Grand Slam, Pasha. Wait about 5 years to have all those kids, and you get many millions of dollars.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? I can't imagine them having...
So I'm going to start my own one, Moses. I'm starting the Thorin Pasha Zloty Grand Slam, where he gets millions of zloty, as I'm his manager, you know, in exchange for not having more children within the next 3 to 4 years. If he can keep it down to, like, he can have one every 2 years roughly. If he can keep it down to a manageable level, then the payoff at the end is huge. Yeah.
Maybe he's building a team. Maybe he's going to have like a team of Counter-Strike players in the next year. Maybe that's what he's going for next year. It's
going to be a while, but yeah.
But yeah, no, I just don't imagine Virtus.pro having been like super hardcore practicing quite yet. You know, I know they had like an ES Force boot camp with Navi at the end of Pro League season when they played the relegation matches. They were boot camping with Navi at the time, but I think that was more promotional for like HyperX or one of their sponsors or something like that. So I don't imagine them having been like buckled down quite yet and like.
Plus, here's a factor no one's thinking of. So everyone's doing what ELEAGUE wants, which is they're just thinking of the last matches they played. So there's Vegas match and there was the match at the major, obviously. But remember, like, even the Vegas match was like 4 months ago. Yeah. So realistically, right, the problem is VP hasn't changed that much since then. But actually, the interesting wrinkle to me for Astralis is think about how much Astralis' map pool's changed. Astralis does not have a weak map, bearing in mind they banned Cobblestone anyway.
Yeah.
Dude, they can play everything now. It's mad.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not the best in the world, everything, obviously. But they, like, what weak maps do they have at this point in time, you know? I mean, VP will want to pick Nuke again, but that's not as certain as it once was.
That would be the epic thing, right? If like they just went back to the map.
They should just do that. I hope they do, mate. I hope it's just those 3 maps again, personally, and that they don't throw any like weird wrinkle in there.
Yeah. Well, hopefully Virtus.pro's been refueling. Hopefully they've been getting everything filled up, ready to go. I hate it. I hate just being just because it's just such a fucking platitude, isn't it? Where it's just like, yeah, they can if they show up, any given Sunday type thing. But it's I don't have any faith that they will. But if they do, they obviously can't win that. But I mean, if I had like a gun to my head that says you need to make a decision right now, I'm gonna say Astralis 10 out of 10 times. So we'll see.
It's like that old thing where Nip had made all the major finals for like 5 of them in a row, and then they were like, it doesn't matter what was going on, but they'll definitely make the next one. I was like, well, that'll only work until it doesn't. Like, as soon as it doesn't work anymore, that's a meaningless stat, So it would be the same logic as being like, right, G2's going to play SK, and no team that ever skipped to the semis ever won the tournament, so all my money on SK, please. It's like, well, yeah, I understand why you want to make that, but believe it or not, the odds are still different each time it happens. Like, come on, mate. It doesn't carry over, does it, you bad cunt? Like,
that is a fun piece of trivia, and it stops there. It is not.
It's over now, yeah. We don't need to ever bring that up again. It's over. Okay, so let's go to friberg then.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, Moses. People in esports, especially, in sports as well, don't seem to understand that when you stop playing, you aren't dead. You are still the same person, you just don't play a video game anymore. So as a result, they treat it as if you've died most. So now we're expected to only say wonderful things about what an amazing player friberg was, and it's so sad and all this. Yes, there's a lot of good things we can put on, but at some point we're also going to have to mention some negative things. So let's start with the good. What would you like to say about friberg?
I mean, you could say that in the early portions of CS:GO, probably up until 2014 and maybe even early 2015. I mean, you could say he like defined the role of entry fragger, right? Like he was the name when you talked about someone being an entry fragger going in first, getting that all important opening kill. He was the one that you would bring up as the name for it. So I think he was really one of the early definers of that role in CS:GO, which is awesome. I think also. He was someone who he's a very high impact player, actually. Like when he was having good games, like you'd notice like NIP just wins the games where he's having a good impact, and like that's because he gets very important frags. He's not a high volume fragger. Yeah. We didn't see that many games out of him, but he did a good job of getting like those frags that could turn the tide of the match. Whether it's like the opening once to get into a bomb site, even if he had a teammate dead, he became a specialist on certain portions of the map. Obviously, the easy one to go to is the banana on Inferno, where his name is enshrined there and all that fun stuff. But no, like he was just one of those players that would just like trudge along. You would never really notice anything, but he would get the important kill in those rounds that needed to like swing it over, right? So he would go for the opening kills and he would go to crack open bomb sites. And I always thought he was very, very good in those positions. Even towards the end, we just didn't happen enough. And I don't think that was necessarily a problem with friberg individually all the time. I think it was more dysfunction of the team.
Yeah, and obviously in the early days especially, one area he was very good in was he had some of the best spray early on, because famously at the beginning of CSGO, almost no one had good spray. Like that's why Get Right was actually like a legit god, because it's like he just brought 1.6 spray over to CSGO somehow when everyone else was kind of struggling, Yeah. But actually friberg was also another player who early on had very good spray, and you can see obviously, like even to this day, if you're an entry fragger, think of like the entry fraggers who are the massive impact ones, and it is the Apex type guy who runs in and he just like, one bullet's 2 guys in the head. It's never, you don't do the 1.6 style where you kill the first guy and then spray transfer to the next, because it's still very, very tough to do that consistently. Like spray transfer in CSGO is a very different beast, but friberg could do that because he had the very good spray, so he could really get a lot of impact out of it. Unfortunately though, if you look at his style of play within NiP, it was always destined that A, if his skill level ever dropped off as it did, he would be in trouble. And B, as soon as other teams got really tactical, they would be in a massive amount of trouble. Because the amount of times he went into sites dry was like a fucking joke. And that obviously, like this is what I would have liked to have seen. If I could stop friberg's career in NiP, but like halfway through. So let's go to like the middle of 2014. So basically around, not that long before.
Fiflaren retired.
Right, just before Fiflaren retired. I would actually have made both of them leave the team. And what I would do is I would say, no, don't just retire though. I would put friberg on a different team. What I'd love to have seen is friberg at that point, but on like a tactical team. where he gets flashes and smokes and people set him up, and then he goes in the site and he has like a 2 or 3 people who go in together and he's watching one angle and they're watching the other. That's what I would like to have seen. What could he have played that style? Would it have been effective? Would he have been a good tool in that sense? Because I mean, if you notice, I always gave a lot of praise to Freakazoid, even when he didn't do very well sometimes at Cloud9, because at least he was a guy who had the mentality to go in all the time. And I know what a boon that is if you're an in-game leader. It's so hard to get the guy who will even do that. But unfortunately, that's the part where friberg never really got to be that kind of a benefit for in-game leagues. He never played with one who had that kind of a sense for how to play, So I feel like in that respect, that's where his career could have been lengthened, because it's true. The last couple of years, it was pretty dire. It was a bad scenario for everyone.
It seemed like everyone at NIP suffered from like a case of, and I think the easiest one to point out is Get Right, and I mean this previously, like 2 years back, not right now, but everyone continued for far too long with the play style that had worked in like 2012, 2013, early 2014. No one really, when their kind of styles of playing as individuals didn't work and it was kind of obvious, like they took too long to adapt and to change. Like Get Right, still stuck with that lurking style that wasn't very effective anymore. And he didn't change until Threat came in, and then he took on more of an entry role, but like he varied up his game a little bit, and he got back into the swing of things. And I think friberg suffered from that same thing where it was just this pure entry style that, like you said, doesn't work within that team because they never did any real executes. Like they never did anything to help him out. And that's why I think a lot of his struggles and a lot of like his bad performances aren't individually, because someone like Apex doesn't always have big stats, but we know he's going in hard. Like Freakazoid's another good example that you mentioned, but you always know they're going in for those entry kills, but they have teams to back them up. With friberg, remember there was a stretch where we used to just see him over towards the B bomb site on Inferno. They'd just be like, all right, friberg, try and enter it out of the bomb site, and he'd have to like jump through his own smoke and like flash for himself and try and find one kill, and it was just like hang him out to dry and friberg's dead. And that always looked so bad, and he caught a lot of flack for that, but yeah, I think that he just stuck with that kind of style of just being this pure entry fragger for a little bit too long.
And I definitely think that, by the way, just as a note on that, like that isn't only limited to NIP. You'll find that happens to almost every team that is on top of one. But look at Fnatic now. Where the fuck are they? And part of the reason why is this is exactly why players and athletes need coaches. Because a player's job is to focus on today. And his job is forget what happened yesterday, focus on today, try and do the best of what I have now. And so his paradigm doesn't change. It just goes from day to day to day. So what happens is when a player plays a game, he keeps trying to do the things that he did before that succeeded. And the classic, this is why you need a coach to be able to assess what your team strengths are, assess what the meta is, assess what no longer works and what you have to go towards. And he's the one directing you to where you need to be next. Because to a player, they really do. If you ever talk to them, there's no player at the top level, especially one who was a champion, who actually thinks he lost because his team plays the wrong style or because they don't have like enough tactical depth. What they always will tell you, because it used to work for them, is like, oh no, what happened is I just like, we missed some shots there, or like I fucked up the entry point to that site. And it's the same with pro athletes. If you ever watch a really great NBA player, once they get to that point, where like, they've lost their physical peak and they're going downhill, and it's like, how many years do they have left? What happens is they just keep playing the same style, they just become more and more inefficient. And whenever they're interviewed, they'll never say, I just can't do these things anymore. They'll be like, I had a few shots rim out, that normally go in. And it's like, you want to just go, dude, you're like 34 now. Like, you don't have the strength to do that all game anymore. You don't have the stamina. You're not as quick anymore. You can't beat someone off the dribble. Therefore, he makes you take a harder shot. There's all these factors that the player can't see because he's just thinking again about every day that goes by. So that will happen to everyone. It's just in the case of NIP, they are the most extreme example I've ever seen because they legit kept the same team for like, over 4 years, the same 4-man core. Whereas to me, the reason why, this will sound bizarre, but I actually think this is the worst time ever to have finally cut friberg or have him retire or whatever it is. Because what you did is you waited until the very end, where now when you bring in this new player, right, let's say Rez is amazing. Let's say he was literally everything you wanted in a player. That won't make NIP top 5 again tomorrow. That won't make them win a tournament tomorrow. So what you did was you wasted what was left of the prime of the other players. Like, here's the thing. If you change at the end of 2014 or in the first half of 2015, you still get like a year of Forest and Get Right still being pretty good as a combo, still being a pretty good set of stars, You could you got some wiggle room to win some championships and stuff. So yeah, they won a few championships with like the patented epic style, but I feel like they also kind of threw away a few years extra just praying that it was all going to turn around.
Do you know anything about Rez? I don't know anything about his
I know a
play style
bit.
at all. I haven't seen him play once.
The main thing with him is in that Epsilon team, when they had all the players back, when they had Disco Doppler, they had Draken, Rez, Freddie B, who was the fit, or Barbar was the player they got in. Right, what happened was, initially in that era, so we're talking like mid 2016, the star players were clearly like Disco Doppler and Draken, and they were like, the clear best players, and then the other players would just have the odd game that they were good. And what happened was, when Disco Doppler went to Fnatic, actually Draken didn't just carry as the solo star. He was still good, but actually it was Rez that really elevated his game and seemed to kind of step into that space and become arguably the best player in the team. Now, I can understand why it was Draken who went to NiP initially, because, they've wanted a proper AWPer for a long time. Alu obviously was long gone by this point in time. Yeah. Having Forrest do it's kind of inefficient. So picking Draken initially was the right pick, but I do feel like the next player in line should have been Rez. Like, it shouldn't have been, for example, Disco Doppler or whatever, I think actually he kind of didn't show enough in Fnatic. So I think it's a good pickup. I do think it's like, bearing in mind you're not going to get Olofmeister to come at this point in time. I think it's about the best you could go for. It's not a bad gamble. And obviously, again, it's a young player. That's also a great thing as well. Like, the problem with getting a JW or an Olofmeister is they themselves have those problems where they're stuck in their old ways and they're a bit burned out. At least this guy is hungry,
Yeah, and obviously he's going to do what he can to fit into around the other players, right? If you bring a JW or Olaf in, you just kind of get them, and you have to fit them into the team. This way, you can kind of mold the younger guys. Back on to friberg. I hope he doesn't retire. I think it would be really, really cool to see him in another team. And I thought a little bit about this last night. I think it would be really cool. Like, I don't know. This is barring any language issues that might happen. Like, what if he went to North for AZ? What if they found someone who's similar to what Rubino was, where he's somebody who's going to do the dirty work. You can get this guy who's willing to go in first, willing to play a little bit of the bitch roles, the ones that are tough to play, that are just like the dirty frags that don't have a lot of flair to them.
The problem I have with that is, first of all, North obviously, in one of the reasons that no one apparently is ever going to fucking admit to, as to why Rubino left or was kicked or whatever went on there, is that they apparently did want the 5 Danes, and you had to live in Copenhagen or something to do it. But then secondly, my big problem with North essentially boils down to this. They've tried the AZ experiment. It didn't work as far as I'm concerned. And the worst part about it, in my opinion, the most egregious element of AZ being in that team, is that they do use him the way MSL used to use him in the past, where they do that 2-man combo where MSL goes in and AZ goes in as his entry partner. And it doesn't work. But the worst thing is, I saw Config do that role, but better last year than AZ does it now. So I actually feel like when you look at the fact Config's the best player in the team, I feel like AZ is even limiting that. So my problem is, if anything, I would rather put Config back in that role and have someone be the lurk role. And the problem with that is, the obvious choice is Valde, because he literally plays a lurk role. So I don't know if that will happen if they wait until after the major on that one. Obviously, people thought maybe Valde would be the person to join NiP, which also hasn't happened. So actually, it turns out the Valde one legitimately is a mystery. No one knows where the fuck this guy's going, and he literally is just not playing for anyone, despite being, by all accounts, a sick player. So I feel like the North puzzle is... here's the thing, that will sort itself out, but I feel like this is where I'm almost certain they won't make a roster change before the major. So they'll play out all these last tournaments, and I think they won't do well at the major. I think they're a team where, for me, they could make the playoffs and that's it. They're not going to the semifinals, they're not going to the finals, they're definitely not winning the major. So I think that will naturally play itself out, and they will have to do a roster move at that point in time. But unfortunately, I don't think friberg's an option for that. In fact, that's the thing. I think friberg's just going to retire, because I think if you look at it, who can he go to? Could he go to Godsend? Okay, maybe. Godsend's not in a good position. Maybe they would take him. Yeah, why would he want to? He definitely wouldn't want to go to Epsilon, because obviously they don't have a lot of money, They don't have the great salaries, etc. Although we don't know what the buyout was for.
He speaks good English, though. He could go to a bunch of different teams if there was a spot. It's just about fun of the spot, right? Because
here's the thing. If there's a team that wants to be cynical and cash in on the fact that, by the way, at the moment, a lot of fans would be like, oh, amazing, I'll support this team if friberg joins it. That would happen, Then I would say someone like a Mouse Sports, Penta, these teams should definitely consider it. It wouldn't be the most ridiculous option. Also, he has experience. That counts for something.
Yeah.
It's just, you got to ask yourself questions like, first of all, would anyone want him? And then secondly, does he even have any motivation at this point in time?
Yeah, I would like to see him in another team, but it does make sense. I know what the press release said, that NIP have offered him a spot within the organization if he chooses not to play.
Okay, to do what? Get rid of all the chocolate that's got 2 days left on this whole idea. Listen, Moses, that's not even a bad joke because who wouldn't want that job? That's a fantastic job to have. I'd love to have that job. Eating all the chocolate.
I saw a news story today that made me think of you and this nip situation.
Come on.
The headline was, man has 30 pounds of shit removed from his colon. He was apparently constipated for 22 years. And he had to go into surgery to get all of this shit removed. And I was just thinking, there's a Nip joke in there that comes from Thorin's brain of the fact that Nip has just been constipated with this lineup that just doesn't work for 4 years, and now they just have to surgically remove part of it. It's just, maybe I should have just taken it myself.
I mean, that's where they're just going to come up with some ridiculous thing, isn't it? Like, they win a match, and then they're like, so what changed for you guys? It's like, it's really weird, but we keep having 5 players alive after 40 seconds. Like, I never realized how good the game is when you play 5v5. Something like that, some
You've been playing on hard mode this whole time.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Then
again, though, my joke always was that friberg was playing on nightmare mode from like 2014 onwards, because it's like you're joining the game, like, oh, what am I going to play? I heard that the entry fragger mission's quite difficult. Okay, like settings, like easy, normal, hard, nightmare mode. When you go to nightmare mode, it's like flashbangs no longer exist except for CT teams. Like, what the fuck? And then you run in and you're like, are you supporting me? And then the guy's like, yeah, right behind you, big fella. And he's like, like that thing where you're in an ESEA pog and you run out of the spawn and they're all like accidentally bumping into the truck on like Nuke. It's like, oh shit, I'll be right there. Like,
sorry,
you're like, fuck you guys.
Like a friend.
Yeah. And it's like, my joke used to be like, oh, do your fucking character models run slower than mine? Do they have like a slower move speed, motherfucker? How am I getting like the second spawn and I'm always in first to the ramp room? Like, what is this?
Fucking assholes running with their guns out and shit. Do you think do you think this is the end of the changes for NIP, at least for the time being? I mean, obviously for the major, but do you think soon after the major? Oh, actually, they're already eliminated from the major. Fuck me.
Yeah, they're not even. The major.
Do you think this is like the last one? Do you think they're looking at exist in any way right now?
I think they should be. Here's the thing. I can understand why you would give Get Right a little bit of extra time, because you'd say he was so good and he in general he's got such a great work ethic.
He's just the face of NIP, isn't he?
He's just got a great chance to come back, right? The problem with the Exist one is, like, obviously you give Exist a little bit of time with these 2 new players and see how it goes. Maybe it's not a problem. But if there are any more problems, I mean, the only solution if they continue to have problems is you've got to keep removing players till eventually you don't have problems, because it's no longer fucking Nip. It's just, Forest and 4 new players who are good, That's the other solution to what you can do.
Yeah. Where do you think you don't think this is going to improve them massively? Do you? Because I don't see them immediately. Like, I mean, they don't have any leagues to play in, which would be nice. They have plenty of time to practice this lineup, and I don't think they have they have Cologne for sure.
Yeah. So
that's the next time we'll see them. We'll see them in Cologne. They've got about 3 weeks.
And that is obviously like a murderer's row, that tournament. That's a fucking tough one to go through.
Yeah, they're not going to make it in the groups there. I doubt it, unless for some reason we do get like some like fucking time traveling. It'll be like Get Right just going fucking ape shit like it's 2013 again, or that what's that fucking I have that scene from, did you see Logan?
Yeah.
I have that scene at the end where he's like running through the forest and he fucking injects himself in the neck with like the
mad spoilers, of course, but
listen, that movie's been out long enough, and it's in the nerd. We're in the nerd.
Is that your
community.
rule? Okay. Yeah.
Everyone should have seen Logan by now. Yeah. I don't give a fuck. But yeah, that's like that. They're gonna need that Get Right, maybe even that Forest to get out of groups at Cologne. But even after that, like, do you see these guys like maybe next season of EPL? Do you see them qualifying for like top 6 in Europe, or next season of VCS? Do you see them qualifying for that with this lineup?
I will give them as credit in as much as this, right? NIP throughout their history and generally has been pretty good online. Like, even when they weren't that great on LAN, they did always seem to qualify for the EPLs and, oftentimes got to a lot of these tournaments. So, like, in a way, I could see them being all right online. My big problem is I just don't know if the fire is there outside of the young players to actually be champions again. Like, I think at the moment they're almost like in damage control mode. Like, let's just stem the bleeding, Whereas... Yeah. Really, you want to like cut out the problem and then start over. And like now we're back to being a really dangerous team, Whereas I don't know if that exists for them, unfortunately.
Yeah, Yeah, which is a shame, right? It will be interesting to see if they come back to it, because I think like Get Right. When every time I talk to him, I've always talked about him, and I think everyone kind of knows this by now that he's like one of the hardest working players that there's ever been. The question is, it's been incredible to see. It's always incredible seeing the old school players keep that up, because that's always the hardest part of your game to keep fresh, right? It's not like the individual skill, it's not like the talent, it's the motivation, it's the mental game that you have day in and day out of death matching, of watching a demo, of preparing for a team, of whatever it might be, mentally getting yourself in shape for a tournament. That's the one that slips. I'm very worried that maybe they finally hit the end of the gas tank in that sense.
Because here's the thing, right? So okay. Another detail I just remembered about Rez is that actually when they had the lineup where they got Barbar into the lineup, I remember actually he was playing an entry role at that time. So I wonder if that means like it's a pure swap. He will actually take over friberg's spot in that sense. Because in that world, here's a move for you. Let's say they wait 2 or 3 months and they give the Res lineup a chance. They play a few tournaments, and then it turns out that it's not working out with Get Right. Imagine this move: same NIP lineup as this, but you put Valde instead of Get Right.
Ooh, that's spicy.
That's a lineup where you've got enough young talent and people who are good now. You've got a couple of older ones. You've got Exist Still. You've got Forest. That's an exciting lineup.
You have to speak in English, I would assume, right?
Valde's a very intelligent guy. I think he could speak English, no problem.
Yeah, but yeah, the rest, yeah, I guess.
Probably even knows a little bit of Swedish, maybe not much, but a little bit.
That'd be kind of cool. I can't really even comprehend. I think if Get Right leaves this team, the whole lineup gets blown up. I can't even comprehend Get Right not being in this lineup, to be honest with you.
The thing is, I think that's the move right now. Because of where Fnatic and Godsent are at, like both in very different places to where it doesn't make sense. Like doing an actual full Swedish shuffle doesn't make any sense right now to me, because none of the teams are good enough and they're all so set in their own ways with who they want to play with. So to me, the next move, if you have to blow it up, you've got to go multinational. Like I would actually do that, dude. I'd get Valde and I'd get in Rubino and I'd go like full multinational, but good players, and just go, okay, I'm going to give up the communication, not having Swedish culture and that, but I'm just going to get players that I know are good and that I've never played together and try and make something new, make an experimental team,
Yeah. Yeah. There's rumors right now of this Swedish shuffle going on, aren't there? Have you heard about this?
That's what people keep saying, but the problem with that is until
it's been going on for like
there's a lot of moves that just don't get the trigger pulled on them, So
well, and they both now. I mean, now it's in the situation. Remember, we always used to say it'd be so cool if NIP could get some of these upcoming Fnatic players, and then they became the best team in the world, and they couldn't get them. That's too late obviously.
For that, mate. That's not.
But now both teams are in hell. Now both teams are both teams are stuck in this period where they cannot get back to their former glory. So yeah, why would you do that? Yeah, I think this Swedish shuffle team things is dead.
I've got to go now, mate.
Deuces.
That really is the end.
Hello, this is Neo, just an average CSGO player, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.